My daughter broke her neck and was paralyzed, but today a miracle happened. I never thought I'd see her smile again, and I never imagined that what felt like the darkest year of our lives would lead to this moment. It's a story of fear, guilt, hope, and an unexpected kind of heroism, a story I need to tell you from the very beginning. It all started like any other ordinary day, the kind of day you never think will change your life forever. My daughter was 3 years old, bursting with energy, laughter spilling out of her in waves. She couldn't sit still for more than a minute, always running, climbing, spinning around the living room, and somehow always ending up tangled in her little brother's toys. She had this light about her, this spark, that made it impossible to stay mad at her even when she pulled my socks off and threw them across the room like they were projectiles. We had been taking her to dance lessons every week. She loved it. Watching her spin and leap, seeing her tiny feet follow the rhythm of the music, it was one of those moments that felt like pure joy. My wife and I would sit at the edge of the room, sometimes struggling to keep our own excitement from showing too much. We were proud, of course, but mostly we just loved seeing her so alive, so happy. On that particular day, she had finally fallen asleep in the back of the truck next to her little brother. I remember glancing in the rearview mirror and feeling a rare wave of calm wash over me. She was lying there with her arms tucked close, her head tilted slightly, mouth open just enough that I could see her little teeth. It's funny how something as small as that, a child asleep in the back seat, can suddenly make the world feel right. For a moment, I believed everything was fine, that nothing could touch us. We were almost home. Just a few minutes left. I can still see the street in my mind, the way the afternoon sun hit the pavement, the sounds of kids playing somewhere in the distance. And then it happened. Out of nowhere, a car came, turning left, and it was too fast, too late. I remember the screech of tires, the violent crunch of metal, the deafening sound that felt like it shook my entire body. The next few moments are a blur. My wife and I were unharmed. Somehow we were fine, but my daughter, she wasn't. The door she was sitting next to crumpled inward, and in an instant, everything changed. There was a stillness I can't describe, a terrible, heavy stillness that settled over the back seat. She was quiet. Too quiet. I remember shouting her name. "Sweetheart, are you okay? Look at me." My voice was shaking, panicked, but I needed to know she was alive, and she was alive. But that wasn't enough to calm the storm raging inside me. Her neck. Her neck had been hit directly by the force of the door. We rushed her to the hospital. Those 2 days felt endless. 2 days in a sterile, fluorescent-lit waiting room, staring at nothing, imagining everything. I held my wife's hand, though. I barely noticed her grip. My mind was elsewhere. We had to wait for surgery, and every second was unbearable. We watched her small body on the gurney, tubes and monitors surrounding her like a cage. I remember feeling frozen, thinking that if I blinked, something worse would happen. When the doctors finally came out after surgery, their faces were carefully neutral. They told us she was alive, and then they explained the rest. Her spinal cord had been damaged, irreparably, in the way that doctors say things that sound precise but feel like cruel sentences. She was 3 years old, and according to everything medical science could predict, she was never going to walk again. My stomach turned. I had no words. How do you explain that to a 3-year-old? How do you explain that to yourself? The house we came home to after the hospital was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. We had prepared the bedrooms, the playroom, everything to accommodate her needs. But nothing could prepare me for the sight of her trying to move the way she used to trying. To climb onto the couch, trying to chase her brother, failing, and then crying. The helplessness in her little eyes was unbearable. It's one thing to lose something yourself, but to see someone so small, so innocent, face it, it's a different kind of pain. My wife and I tried to be strong. We tried to hide our fear and grief, but it leaked through anyway. I'd catch myself watching my daughter cry as her brother ran around the yard, swinging, laughing, and I wanted to trade places with her. I wanted to take the injury for her, to take the pain, the limitations. But I couldn't. I could only stand there and hold her hand, whispering that everything was going to be okay. Even though I didn't know if it would be. My wife cried in the kitchen, alone. I caught her more than once, silent sobs shaking her shoulders. And me, I found myself going out to the garage late at night. I needed space, I thought. I needed air. But it wasn't just air I needed. I was planning, scheming, thinking. I couldn't shake the guilt. It wasn't my fault. I knew that logically, but logic doesn't erase the image of my daughter lying still, struggling while life continued on around her. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Therapy sessions, doctor's visits, adjustments to our house, adjustments to our lives. I watched my daughter struggle to understand why she couldn't run like she used to, why she couldn't climb the little ladder to the slide. I watched other parents laugh with their kids in the park, feeling a pang that never went away. Every smile she had once shared with us felt like a memory from another lifetime. And I thought, at night, lying awake, that we'd never see it again. And then came yesterday, her birthday. A day that should have been filled with balloons, laughter, and carefree joy. She had an expectation of coarse presents, excitement, maybe a small cake with sprinkles. But I had something different in mind, something my wife had no idea about. Something I had spent months planning, months thinking about in the quiet dark of the garage, nights filled with doubt and fear and hope all at once. I couldn't wait to see her reaction, yet I was terrified. Because what if it didn't work? What if it didn't bring her the joy I wanted so badly to give her? What if it wasn't enough? My heart raced as she tore open the wrapping paper, her small hands trembling with anticipation, and then I saw it, that moment, that laugh, that smile. It was the first time in over a year I'd seen it. I almost cried right there. I almost fell to my knees and thanked the universe for letting me see it. The sound was pure, unburdened, like a river breaking through a dam. For a moment, she was just my daughter again, 3 years old, filled with light, running in my mind's eye. Even if her body COULDN single quotes D. It was more than a gift. It was a miracle. A moment that erased all the fear, the grief, the guilt, only for a few precious hours. And I realized something important in that instant. Sometimes hope isn't about curing, fixing, or returning to the way things were. Sometimes hope is about creating a moment where the impossible feels possible, even just for a heartbeat. As I watched her laugh, I felt a swell of emotion I couldn't name. Relief, joy, love. After her birthday, the house felt different. It wasn't just the laughter echoing from her room, or the way her small hands clutched her new gift with such determination. It was something deeper, something unspoken that hung in the air. My wife noticed it too, though we never said it out loud. It was as if, for the first time in over a year, the weight that had pressed down on our family had lifted just slightly, like a cloud moving away to reveal a sliver of sun. I couldn't stop thinking about the accident, about that single moment that had changed everything. I replayed it constantly in my mind, the way the other car appeared out of nowhere, the way time seemed to slow down, the metallic crash that still haunted my dreams. But yesterday, seeing her smile, I realized something important. The accident didn't define her, it didn't define us. It was a chapter, yes, a terrifying, cruel chapter. But not the entire story. The first few days after the birthday were a mix of awe and exhaustion. She was still limited. Of course, her body hadn't miraculously healed, and every movement required care and caution, but the gift had given her something she hadn't felt in months: autonomy. She could interact, play, and explore in ways that made her feel capable. For the first time in over a year, she could laugh without hesitation, without restraint, without the shadow of what had happened hanging over her like a constant, invisible chain. I watched her that morning, sitting at the breakfast table, her little hands gripping a spoon with an intensity that was almost comical. She was so focused, so determined, like every simple task was a grand adventure. I smiled, quietly, almost holding my breath, afraid that this moment might disappear if I looked too closely. My wife watched too, from the counter, her eyes glistening, as she wiped a stray tear from her cheek. No words were needed. We both knew the miracle we had witnessed. Both the relief and the hope it carried. Later that day, I took her out to the backyard. The sun was warm, filtering through the trees in golden streaks, and for a moment it felt like the world had returned to normal. She was playing with her brother, her laughter mingling with his as they chased each other around the yard. I sat on the porch watching, and realized how much I had missed this, truly missed it, not just the physical play, but the sound of life returning, the pulse of joy that had been absent for far too long. Her brother, too, seemed to notice the change. He was gentle with her now, patient in a way I hadn't seen before. He adjusted his games, allowed her space, helped her in ways that didn't feel forced but natural, and she responded with laughter, with a lightness I had almost forgotten existed. Watching them interact, I felt a swell of gratitude so intense that it almost hurt. I wanted to freeze time, to hold on to this moment forever. That evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the yard, I found myself alone in the garage again, but this time the space felt different. It wasn't just a place of grief or planning, it had become a sanctuary, a place where I had poured my worry, my hope, and my love into creating something that mattered. I ran my hand over the workbench, remembering every night I had spent here, every idea, every failure, every tiny success. And now, seeing her smile, hearing her laugh, I understood the purpose behind it all. I thought about the months leading up to her birthday, the secrecy, the planning. My wife had no idea, and part of me had feared that she would never forgive me for keeping it from her. But it wasn't just about the surprise, it was about giving my daughter a moment of freedom, a sense of normalcy, even if just for a little while. I had spent nights imagining what it would feel like to see her laugh, to see her forget the limitations her body had imposed. And now it had happened. The days that followed were a mix of therapy, small victories, and quiet reflection. We worked with her therapist, focusing on her mobility, her strength, and her independence. Each session was a reminder of how far she had come, how resilient she was, and yet, every time she achieved something new, no matter how small, it reminded me of the fragility of the past year, of the accident, of the fear and helplessness we had all felt. I also noticed my own transformation. The nights I had spent crying in the garage, the weight of guilt I had carried, it began to lift, replaced by a quiet determination. I realized that while I couldn't undo the accident, I could shape her experiences moving forward. I could create moments of joy, of empowerment, of normalcy, and in doing so, I could heal parts of myself that had been broken by fear and guilt. One evening, after a particularly long day of therapy, I sat on the couch with her. She leaned against me, exhausted but happy, her small hand in mine. She looked up at me with a seriousness that only a child can muster and said, "Daddy, thank you." My chest tightened. Not just for the words, but for the weight they carried. She didn't understand fully what she was thanking me for, but she felt the love and effort behind it. And I felt a gratitude so profound that it left me speechless. Her brother climbed onto the couch too, curling up beside us, and for a moment, the three of us were together in a way that felt sacred. I realized that the accident, the pain, the fear, it had reshaped us, yes, but it hadn't broken us. It had forced us to confront our limits, our fears, our love for each other in ways we hadn't before. And in that confrontation, we had found something stronger, something more enduring than before. Night fell, and I watched them sleep, her small form peaceful, untroubled, for the first time in over a year. My mind wandered, thinking of the future, the challenges, the therapy, the adjustments, the days when hope might feel distant again. But I also thought of the moments like yesterday, like that laughter, like the freedom she had felt, and I knew that those moments were worth everything. Every tear, every sleepless night, every ounce of worry had led us here, to this fragile, beautiful balance of joy and resilience. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be struggles, setbacks, and fears that would resurface. But I also knew something more important, my daughter's spirit, her courage, her laughter. It was stronger than any obstacle. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that we could face anything together. The gift she had received wasn't just an object. It was a bridge between fear and hope, between helplessness and empowerment, between the accident and the life we were determined to build afterward. It reminded us all that miracles aren't just random acts of luck. They are the product of love, determination, and the relentless refusal to accept despair. And so I made a vow to myself that night as I watched her sleep. I would continue to fight for her happiness, to create moments of freedom, to nurture her laughter, no matter how fleeting or fragile it might be. I would never stop, because seeing her smile again wasn't just a gift for her, it was a gift for all of us, a reminder that life, even after tragedy, could still shine in unexpected ways. The weeks following her birthday felt surreal, like we were walking through a world that had been reshaped, but in ways we didn't fully understand yet. Every day I saw my daughter's confidence grow, her laughter linger longer, her curiosity spark brighter. But underneath it all, there was still the lingering shadow of the accident, the constant reminder that her life had changed irrevocably. One afternoon, I found myself watching her in the backyard again, her brother running around ahead, carefree, and she was trying to mimic him in her own way. She wasn't walking, not in the traditional sense, but she was moving using the tools, the adjustments, the little inventions that I had built into her gift. She was exploring, testing boundaries, learning new ways to navigate the world she now inhabited. And though her movements were small, controlled, limited, the determination in her eyes made her seem larger than life. It hit me then, harder than ever before, how much she had changed us. The accident hadn't just altered her body. It had altered our very perception of life, love, and resilience. My wife and I had become hyper-aware of every detail, every obstacle, every opportunity. We measured the world not just by its possibilities, but by its limitations, her limitations, and how we could transform those limits into freedom. I caught my wife watching me from the kitchen window one afternoon. I knew what she was thinking. We didn't need to speak. We never needed to speak. We shared that silent acknowledgement that we were in this together, that every invention, every effort, every night spent planning or crying alone in the garage, it was all for her. I had begun to understand something profound. Being a parent isn't just about providing. It's about shaping, creating, and fighting against the unfairness of life to carve out moments of normalcy and joy for someone you love beyond measure, her. Therapy sessions became more than exercises, they were adventures. Her therapist, patient and skilled, guided her through movements, stretches, and exercises that challenged her both physically and mentally. Some days were victories, others were setbacks. I remember one morning she was frustrated, tears brimming, because she couldn't reach a toy she wanted. My heart sank, but I didn't rush to solve it. Instead, I let her sit with her frustration, let her wrestle with the reality of her limitations. Then slowly she tried again, and then again. By the end of the session, she had found a way, her own unique solution. And the smile that spread across her face was brighter than any I'd seen since the accident, watching her navigate the world. Differently, I began to notice small miracles everywhere. A glance, a gesture, a laugh, each one a triumph over the cruel randomness that had struck our lives. I found myself documenting these moments in my mind, storing them like treasure, knowing that these were the moments that would sustain us in darker times. And there were dark times nights when I couldn't sleep, replaying the crash, imagining different outcomes, feeling guilty for what we couldn't control. My wife and I would sit in the living room, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking in hushed tones, acknowledging the trauma but refusing to be defined by it. One evening, I watched her attempt to climb onto the porch step by herself. She struggled, her small body trembling with effort, and I felt the familiar pang of helplessness. But then, with a look of sheer determination, she used her arms, her ingenuity, and the tools I had helped her develop, and she made it. She paused at the top, looked down at me with a triumphant grin, and I felt a rush of pride that left me breathless. That moment wasn't just about physical accomplishment. It was about reclaiming agency over her life, refusing to let the accident define her limits. It was also around this time that I noticed my own transformation in a more subtle, internal way. The nights spent crying in the garage, the heavy guilt, the fear, they began to shift. They didn't disappear, not entirely, but they became a source of motivation rather than despair. Every night, every tear shed alone, every anxious thought about what we had lost and what she had lost, became fuel. Fuel to create, to design, to find solutions, to push beyond the boundaries of what seemed possible. I was no longer simply a father. I was a guardian, a builder, a creator of moments that mattered, and yet, even in this growth, I couldn't ignore the subtle, almost cruel reminders of our reality. Other parents in the park, other children running freely, laughing, climbing, playing without thought or limitation. Those moments stabbed at me, a reminder of what had been stolen. I caught myself recoiling at times, a mixture of anger and grief swelling in my chest. But over time, I learned to channel that feeling differently, not as resentment, but as determination. Every laugh she achieved, every small independence she claimed, was a victory over that stolen normalcy. And I was determined she would have as many victories as possible. There were nights when she would wake, restless, unable to sleep, frightened by dreams she couldn't articulate. I would hold her close, whispering words of comfort, telling her stories, making promises that she didn't fully understand but could feel in the rhythm of my voice, the warmth of my arms. Those nights were exhausting, and yet, in some strange way, they became sacred. They were opportunities to reinforce love, security, and hope in ways the accident had threatened to erase. And then, one particular afternoon, something shifted in her entirely. We had been working on a series of exercises to strengthen her arms and upper body, small but essential steps in reclaiming independence. She was determined, more focused than ever, and for the first time, I felt a surge of confidence in her, not just physically but emotionally. She was no longer just my injured daughter. She was my daughter again, fierce, resilient, full of spirit and fire, ready to engage with the world on her own terms. Her brother noticed it too. He began to cheer her on more enthusiastically, celebrating her small victories with a kind of pride that only siblings can feel. They laughed together, pushed each other, shared secrets, and in those moments, the accident felt distant, not forgotten, but held at bay by the strength of their bond. Watching them, I realized how much we all needed these moments of normalcy, these moments of connection, to survive and thrive despite the trauma that had reshaped our lives. Even my wife, who had carried her own share of guilt and grief, began to find solace in these small triumphs. I could see her shoulders relax, her laughter return in fragments, and in those moments, our family began to heal in ways I hadn't dared hope for. The accident had brought us to the edge, yes, but it had also forced us to confront what truly mattered, to strip away the trivial and focus on the essence of love, resilience, and joy. By the time evening fell, and the golden light of the sun painted the living room in warm hues, I sat with her on the couch, reflecting on everything that had happened over the past year. The accident, the surgeries, the therapy, the tears, the sleepless nights, the fears, the guilt. It was all still there, but it had transformed. It had become a backdrop against which we celebrated the miraculous, the unexpected, the joyous. And in her laughter, in her triumphs, I felt the first real sense of hope in over a year. That night, as I watched her drift into sleep, peaceful and content, I thought about the future. I thought about all the challenges that still lay ahead, all the therapy sessions, all the moments of frustration and fear. But I also thought about her laughter, her determination, her courage. And I realized that no matter what the future held, she had already proven something extraordinary, that the human spirit, even when bound by circumstance, can find ways to shine, to triumph, and to reclaim joy. I whispered a silent promise to her as I sat there, hand on her small back, breathing in the faint scent of her hair, feeling the rise and fall of her chest. I promised that I would never stop fighting for her happiness, that I would never let the accident define her life, that I would continue to create moments of freedom, joy, and love. Because for a father there is no greater purpose, no higher calling than to protect, to nurture, and to champion the light within your child, even when the world seems determined to snuff it out. The following weeks were a mix of progress and frustration, of small victories intertwined with moments that reminded us of the fragility of what we had. My daughter's laughter had returned, yes, but the shadow of the accident was never far behind. Every time she struggled to reach something, every time she fell or got stuck, my chest tightened. The weight of guilt pressed on me, heavier than ever. Even as I tried to transform it into motivation, I started keeping a closer eye on her, tracking her movements, analyzing every step, every effort she made. Not in a controlling way, but in a protective, careful way. She had grown accustomed to my constant presence, the reassurance in my voice, the steadying hands when she needed support. I realized that my own anxiety had become part of her reality, a reflection of the fear and helplessness we had both carried for months. And I knew I needed to manage it. For both our sakes, her therapy sessions became increasingly challenging. The exercises were not just physical, they were mental, emotional, requiring patience, resilience, and a willingness to push through pain. Some days she refused to cooperate, frustrated by her limitations. I would sit beside her, holding her hand, whispering encouragements, reminding her of her own strength. "You've done it before, sweetheart. You can do it again," I'd say, and she would look at me, eyes filled with determination and trust. Those sessions were grueling, but they were also moments of profound connection. One particular day stands out vividly in my mind. She had been struggling with a set of exercises that required upper body strength and coordination. I could see the frustration building in her small frame, her face scrunching with effort, tears threatening to spill. She looked at me, her tiny lips quivering, and whispered, "I can't, Daddy." My heart sank, but I knew this was a crucial moment. I knelt beside her, held her shoulders, and met her gaze. "You can," I said firmly, but gently. "I believe in you. I've seen you do impossible things. You are stronger than you think." Something in her shifted then. She drew in a deep breath, nodded, and tried again and again. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, she succeeded. The smile that spread across her face was radiant, a mixture of triumph, relief, and pride. I felt tears prick my own eyes, but I held them back, focusing on her. For a brief moment, all the fear, all the grief, all the guilt melted away, replaced by pure, unadulterated joy. It wasn't just about physical accomplishments. I started noticing the subtle changes in her personality. The way she began to assert herself, to explore her environment, to interact with the world with renewed confidence. She asked more questions, experimented more boldly, and expressed herself in ways that had been suppressed by fear and limitation. The accident had taken much from her, but it had not taken her spirit, and that realization was both a relief and a revelation. Her brother played a pivotal role in this transformation. He became more patient, more understanding, more protective. He cheered her on during therapy, helped her navigate small obstacles, and celebrated every small success with enthusiasm. Their bond deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. I watched them from the sidelines, my heart swelling with pride and gratitude. The accident had tested our family in unimaginable ways, but it had also strengthened us, revealing resilience and love we didn't fully recognize before. Despite these moments of joy, the reality of her condition was never far away. I found myself thinking about the future constantly, her education, her independence, her social interactions. I worried about how other children would perceive her, how the world might treat her differently. But I also realized that worrying would not change anything. What mattered was what I could do now, in this moment, to create opportunities, to provide support, to nurture her growth. I began devising new ways to encourage her independence. Small tools, little adjustments, and modifications became part of our daily routine. Some were simple grip aids for utensils, cushions for support, but others were more inventive, the product of months of observation, trial and error, and relentless determination. Each successful attempt filled her with confidence, and each failure taught her resilience. And I learned alongside her, discovering patience, ingenuity, and the profound power of unwavering support. One evening, after an especially challenging day, I found myself sitting in the garage once more. The place had transformed in my mind, not a space of grief or solitude, but a workshop of possibility, a laboratory of hope. I ran my hands over the tools, the half-finished projects, the sketches pinned to the walls. Every line, every idea, every late-night session had been for one purpose: to restore her sense of freedom, to rebuild her world in a way that accommodated her needs without limiting her spirit. As I sat there, reflecting, I thought about the accident again. The memory was still vivid, still sharp, but it no longer consumed me with guilt or fear. Instead, it became a reminder of what we had endured and what we had accomplished. The accident had tested us, pushed us to our limits, and in response, we had created something extraordinary, a renewed sense of life, joy, and possibility for our daughter. Sleep often came late, my mind racing with ideas, fears, and hopes. But I welcomed the solitude, the chance to think without interruption, to plan, to imagine. I visualized her playing freely, exploring without fear, laughing without restraint. I imagined her future school, friends, adventures, and I began to believe, truly believe, that these things were possible despite the challenges she faced. Her smiles became a kind of compass, guiding me through the uncertainty. Every time she laughed, I felt a surge of purpose. Every time she achieved something she thought impossible, I felt a validation of all the effort, all the sleepless nights, all the tears I had shed in secret. These moments became milestones, not just for her, but for me as a father, as a protector, as someone who refused to accept despair. And in those quiet moments, watching her sleep, I realized something profound. The accident had not destroyed our family. It had reshaped us, yes, but it had also revealed our strength, our love, and our capacity for resilience. We had been tested in ways no parent should ever endure, yet we had emerged not unscathed, but stronger, more connected, and more determined to cherish every moment we had together. The future remained uncertain, filled with challenges and obstacles yet to be faced. But the foundation we had rebuilt, the bonds we had strengthened, and the victories both large and small that we had achieved provided a sense of security and hope. I knew that no matter what came next, we would face it together, with courage, creativity, and an unwavering commitment to each other's well-being. And so, as the night deepened and the house grew silent, I held my daughter close, breathing in her warmth, listening to the steady rise and fall of her chest. I whispered promises I hoped she would understand someday, promises of love, protection, and unending support. I vowed to continue creating moments of joy, to continue nurturing her independence, and to continue celebrating every small triumph along the way. Because in the end, it wasn't the accident that defined her story, it was the resilience, courage, and love that followed it. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The rhythm of our lives had shifted completely, revolving around therapy schedules, doctor appointments, and the constant work of rebuilding our daughter's confidence. It was exhausting, more than I could have imagined, yet each night I fell into bed with a quiet satisfaction, knowing that we were making progress. Her laughter had become a part of our daily routine again, a sound that filled the house and reminded us all of what truly mattered. She was learning to adapt, discovering ways to move, play, and engage with the world that were uniquely hers. Every small achievement, reaching for a toy, spinning in place, helping her brother with a game, was a milestone. And while her progress was incremental, each step forward felt monumental, a triumph against the limitations imposed by the accident. Her brother was integral to this process. I watched their bond deepen in ways I hadn't anticipated. He had always been a caring sibling, but now his patience and understanding had reached new heights. He celebrated her victories with unrestrained joy, offered support without hesitation, and became, in his own quiet way, a source of inspiration for her. I realized that he too had been shaped by this experience, learning resilience, empathy, and the profound value of family. There were still challenges, of course. Some days she would become frustrated with her limitations, tears streaming down her face as she struggled with tasks that had once been effortless. My heart ached during these moments, but I knew that shielding her from disappointment would do more harm than good. I held her, encouraged her, and reminded her of her strength, letting her feel the frustration without letting it define her. And slowly she learned to persevere, to try again, to approach obstacles with courage rather than fear. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult therapy session, I sat with her in the living room. She had been working on exercises to improve her grip and upper body strength, movements that were essential for her independence. She looked at me, exhausted and frustrated, and whispered, "I can't do it, Daddy." I felt the familiar pang of helplessness, the echo of that first year when everything seemed impossible. But this time I didn't despair. I knelt beside her, took her small hand in mine, and said, "You've done hard things before, sweetheart. You can do this too." She looked at me, a mixture of determination and doubt in her eyes, and then, slowly, she tried again. And again, and then, after several attempts, she succeeded. The smile that spread across her face was radiant, a mixture of triumph and pride. I felt tears prick my own eyes, but I held them back, focusing on her. For the first time in months, I saw her not as an injured child, but as a warrior, resilient and unstoppable. Her progress was mirrored in small, everyday moments. She learned to feed herself more effectively, to manipulate toys and objects in ways that allowed her greater independence, and to navigate her environment with creativity and determination. Each small success bolstered her confidence, and with it, our own. We were learning to celebrate the small victories, understanding that they were the foundation for greater accomplishments yet to come. The accident had reshaped not only our daughter's life but our entire family dynamic. My wife and I had become more attuned to each other, more understanding of each other's fears and vulnerabilities. We shared a silent commitment to support one another, to communicate openly, and to remain steadfast in the face of challenges. The experience had tested us in ways we could never have anticipated, but it had also revealed strengths we hadn't known we possessed. Evenings were a time of reflection and bonding. We would sit together, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about our hopes, our fears, and our dreams for the future. I found myself appreciating the quiet moments, the simple acts of holding my daughter's hand, listening to her voice, and watching her interact with her brother. These moments, I realized, were as significant as any physical milestone. They were the proof of emotional resilience. Of the strength of our family bond, her therapy became increasingly complex, incorporating cognitive exercises alongside physical ones. She had to learn problem-solving, patience, and self-regulation, skills that were essential for navigating the challenges imposed by her condition. Each session was an opportunity for growth, a test of perseverance, and a celebration of achievement. And through it all, I was there, guiding her, supporting her, and marveling at her determination. There were moments when I felt overwhelmed by the enormity of our journey. The fear of setbacks, the weight of responsibility, and the constant vigilance required to ensure her safety were burdens I carried silently. But each time I looked at her, each time I witnessed her courage and resilience, I found the strength to continue. Her spirit was unyielding, and it demanded that I be equally steadfast. One particularly memorable day, she achieved a breakthrough that left me speechless. She had been working on a complex set of exercises designed to improve her balance and coordination. After weeks of incremental progress, she managed to complete the sequence flawlessly. The pride in her eyes, the joy in her smile, and the exuberance in her laughter were overwhelming. I felt a surge of emotion that left me momentarily breathless, tears threatening to spill over. It was a reminder of everything we had endured, everything we had fought for, and the remarkable resilience of my daughter, her brother. Witnessing this triumph, erupted in applause, cheering her on with unrestrained enthusiasm. The bond between them, strengthened by shared experiences, was evident in every gesture, every word, every glance. They had become a team, supporting and encouraging each other in ways that transcended typical sibling relationships. I watched them with a mixture of pride and awe, understanding that their connection was a source of strength that would sustain them throughout their lives. As the sun set, casting a warm glow across the living room, I reflected on the journey we had undertaken. The accident, the surgeries, the therapy, the tears, the sleepless nights, it had all led to this moment of triumph, of resilience, of hope. We had been tested in ways no family should endure, yet we had emerged stronger, more connected, and more determined to cherish every moment together. I held my daughter close that night, feeling the steady rise and fall of her chest, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. I whispered promises, pledges of unwavering support, and declarations of love. I vowed to continue creating moments of joy, to nurture her independence, and to celebrate every victory, no matter how small. Because in the end, it wasn't the accident that defined her story, it was the courage, determination, and love that followed it. The months passed in a rhythm that became almost second nature: therapy in the mornings, exercises in the afternoons, moments of play and laughter scattered in between. Yet beneath this routine, an undercurrent of tension never fully left. I carried it with me always, a mix of fear, responsibility, and the memory of that day when everything changed. I could never forget the accident, the sound of metal crushing, the helplessness as I watched the door hit my daughter's small body. Those images remained with me, etched into my memory, a constant reminder of how fragile life truly was. But now, there were cracks in that fierce slivers of hope that shone brighter every day. I watched her grow stronger, more confident, more alive. She laughed without restraint, experimented with her abilities, and even tried new challenges that had seemed impossible months before. And with each triumph, my own heart healed a little, the guilt and helplessness giving way to pride and determination. One afternoon, I took her to a nearby park. It was a place we had avoided for months because of her limitations, the stares of other children and parents making us painfully aware of her difference. But this day was different. I wanted her to experience the world without fear, without constraint, even if only for a short while. Her brother ran ahead, chasing imaginary adventures, and she followed, maneuvering in her own way. Determination etched into every movement. I watched as she approached the swings, the very place that had haunted her for so long, the playground, where she had cried, watching other children soar through the air while she remained grounded. I felt a wave of anxiety crash over me. Would she be discouraged again? Would the past year's trauma overwhelm her? But then I saw the spark in her eyes, the curiosity, the determination, the refusal to be limited. She wasn't thinking about what she couldn't do. She was focused on what she could. With careful guidance, I helped her settle into a specially adapted swing I had designed. It was secure, supportive, but allowed her a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in over a year. I gave her a gentle push, and for the first time since the accident, she soared. Her laughter filled the air, clear and unrestrained, a sound that seemed to erase the months of pain and fear. My chest tightened, tears welling in my eyes as I realized the enormity of what we were witnessing. This was more than a swing, it was a symbol, a moment of reclamation, a testament to her courage. Her brother ran alongside, cheering her on, and for a moment it felt like time had stopped. The world faded, leaving only us, only the joy, only the miracle of that single moment. She laughed until her sides hurt, and I felt my own spirit lift with hers. It was the first time in over a year that I truly felt the weight of the accident lighten, if only for a heartbeat. Later that evening, back at home, I reflected on what had transpired. The swing, the laughter, the sheer joy on her face, it was a culmination of months of effort, love, and determination. The accident had taken so much from us, but in this moment it had given us something equally powerful. The opportunity to witness resilience in its purest form, to see life reclaimed against the odds, therapy sessions that week were transformed by this breakthrough. She approached exercises with renewed vigor, inspired by the confidence she had gained from that single experience. She experimented with movements she had previously avoided, pushed boundaries she had once feared, and embraced challenges with a newfound determination. Every success, no matter how small, reinforced her belief in herself and strengthened the bond between us. I began to notice changes in her behavior beyond physical abilities. She was more assertive, more willing to communicate her needs, more willing to engage with the world around her. Her brother's influence was profound as well, teaching her patience, collaboration, and the joy of shared achievement. Together they formed a team, a unit that defied the limitations imposed by the accident. Even my wife, who had carried her own share of guilt and fear, found solace in these developments. She laughed more freely, engaged with our daughter in new ways, and began to reclaim the joy that had been overshadowed by months of trauma. Our home, once heavy with worry and sorrow, now resonated with laughter, hope, and the quiet determination to continue rebuilding our lives. Despite these advances, the road ahead remained challenging. Each day brought new obstacles, moments of frustration, and fears that tested our resolve. But the miracle of the swing, the triumph of that laughter, reminded me that progress was possible, that joy could be reclaimed, and that resilience was stronger than fear. One night I sat alone in the garage, the familiar place of reflection and creation. I thought about the past year, the accident, the surgeries, the therapy, the sleepless nights, the tears, the fears, and the triumphs. I realized that each struggle had prepared us for moments like today, moments when courage and determination converged to create something extraordinary. I ran my hand over the workbench, the tools, and the sketches, recognizing that every effort, every sleepless night had contributed to the miracle we had witnessed. I understood, in that quiet moment, that miracles weren't random. They were born from perseverance, love, and unwavering belief. They were forged in the quiet spaces of determination, in the moments of despair transformed into action, in the nights spent imagining a brighter future despite overwhelming odds. And yesterday, at the park, we had experienced one of those miracles. First-hand. As I reflected, I whispered a promise to myself and to my daughter. I would continue to fight for her happiness, her independence, and her joy. I would continue to create moments of freedom, to nurture her spirit, and to celebrate every victory, no matter how small. I would never allow the accident to define her story. She was more than her limitations. She was courageous, resilient, and full of life. The following weeks built on this momentum. Therapy continued, now infused with a sense of purpose and excitement. She pushed herself further, attempted new movements, and explored her environment with a confidence that was both inspiring and humbling. Her laughter became a daily soundtrack in our home, a reminder that hope could be reclaimed even in the aftermath of tragedy. Her brother continued to be a constant source of encouragement, and our family bond deepened in ways that words cannot capture. We learned to communicate more openly, support each other more effectively, and find joy in the small moments that had once seemed insignificant. Together, we discovered that life, even after unimaginable challenges, could still hold moments of beauty, triumph, and connection. The weeks that followed were unlike anything I had imagined since the accident. Our daughter had begun to embrace the world in ways that seemed impossible just months earlier. She laughed freely, explored with curiosity, and engaged with her brother and us with a newfound confidence. The joy in her eyes became a constant reminder of why we had endured every sleepless night, every tear, every moment of fear. It was proof that love, determination, and resilience could carve miracles even out of the deepest sorrow. One morning, I watched her attempt a particularly difficult exercise at home. It involved maneuvering from one end of the living room to the other using the adaptive tools we had developed together. She hesitated at first, frustration and doubt flickering across her face, but then she drew in a deep breath, pushed herself forward, and succeeded. Her triumphant smile lit up the room. My chest swelled with pride, tears threatening to spill over, and I felt an overwhelming gratitude for every small step she had taken. Each movement, each victory was a testament to her indomitable spirit. Her brother clapped and cheered beside her, proud of her achievement, and I realized just how deeply their bond had grown. He had become not just a sibling but a partner in her journey, someone who encouraged, celebrated, and lifted her spirits in ways only a brother could. Their connection had become a source of strength for both of them, a shield against the shadows of the past year. Despite these breakthroughs, the challenges were never entirely gone. There were days when frustration bubbled over, when setbacks reminded us of the accident's lingering impact. But now, instead of feeling helpless or defeated, we met these moments with determination and patience. We adapted, encouraged, and celebrated every small success, understanding that growth was not linear but full of peaks and valleys. I remember one particular afternoon when she insisted on attempting something entirely new, a small, simple act that would have been ordinary for most children, but monumental for her. She wanted to climb the little slide in our backyard playground. I felt a surge of fear, memories of the accident rushing back, but I also recognized this as a crucial moment. I knelt beside her, guiding her hands and offering support, but letting her do the work. Step by step, she maneuvered upward, her determination shining through every effort. And when she reached the top, she paused, looked at me, and beamed. That smile, radiant and full of pride, told me everything. She had reclaimed a piece of her childhood, a fragment of the normalcy that had been stolen from her that evening after a day full of triumphs. I found myself in the garage once more, reflecting on the journey we had undertaken. The space that had once been filled with grief and solitude now felt like a workshop of hope and possibility. I ran my hands over the tools and sketches, remembering every night spent designing, planning, and imagining ways to restore her independence. Each effort had been worth it, every sleepless hour a stepping stone to this moment of joy. The accident, I realized, had reshaped us in profound ways. It had exposed our vulnerabilities, our fears, and our limitations, but it had also revealed strengths we hadn't known we possessed. My wife and I had learned patience, ingenuity, and unwavering dedication. Our children had discovered resilience, courage, and the power of love and connection. Together we had transformed tragedy into triumph, sorrow into joy, and limitation into possibility. Then came her birthday, the first one after the accident. We had planned something simple, yet meaningful, a day that focused on celebration, love, and the things that brought her joy. She had no idea what awaited her, and I could feel my heart racing with anticipation. Months of planning, secrecy, and quiet effort had led to this moment. When she opened her gift, her eyes widened in disbelief. It wasn't the toy or game she had expected, but something far more transformative, a custom-designed mobility aid, crafted to her specifications, built to empower her, to allow her to explore, play, and engage with the world as independently as possible. The months I had spent designing, adjusting, and testing it had all led to this instant. Her laughter erupted, unrestrained and pure, the sound filling the room and lifting the weight of the past year. For the first time since the accident, I saw her entirely at ease, fully herself, unburdened by limitation or fear. She ran her hands over the gift, exploring every feature, marveling at the possibilities it offered. And as she played, experimented, and laughed, I realized that this was more than a present. It was a symbol of freedom, resilience, and love. My wife watched too, tears glistening in her eyes, and I saw the relief and joy mirrored in her expression. The months of grief, guilt, and fear had been transformed into this moment of pure happiness. Even her brother celebrated, helping her